All right. Good morning again, and that completes a little bit over 10 minutes of recess for public comment. We have agenda item number 2, approval of the minutes from the October 6, 2020 meeting. Can I get a motion to approve?
So move.
Been moved by Councilmember Wynn.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Jeruso. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ms. Kondo, is there any public comment on the second agenda item, approval of the minutes?
No public comment.
Thank you. 5 yeas, no nays, and the minutes are approved. We are also joined by Councilmember Kristen Palmer. Good morning.
Good morning.
Next item, we have motion number 2148, amendments to the civil service rules, furlough adjustments per the December 21st, 2020 letter from Lisa Hudson, personnel director, most recent former personnel director. We'll turn it over to the administration. Mr. Montano, our CAO, you taking the helm on this?
Yes, sir, I can. Mr. Chair, members of the council, thank you for having us here today. I'll be brief because I know we've discussed this in the past as we were passing the budget relative to our furlough days. What this required, of course, was permission from civil service to, one, implement our furlough days, both for 2020 and 21. However, what we also discussed is that we are anticipatory of some sort of stimulus funding, and we've always been anxiously awaiting those particulars to come down to our city. What we wanted to provide the opportunity for, should it exist, and there's specific criteria should it exist, is the ability to return the furlough days back to our employees. That had to go through legal analysis and then obviously civil service approval. We thought it important because they have obviously stepped up in many different ways, similar to the analogy of the federal government. When they are on furlough days, they often have their furlough days reinstated many months once a budget's passed. What we did want to specify to the council from a fiscal perspective is there's certain criteria. So if we get an advent of some level of stimulus funds, it wouldn't just go directly here. We wanted to be very clear that we wanted a structural balance. There is some very specific items that we need to cover costs on that we're carrying over to in 2021. And then ultimately, should there be enough money, we wanted to be able to have a vehicle to be able to provide this, should it have the opportunity, depending on what we are provided from in some level of stimulus funding. I believe we talked about this very early on when we were initially implementing it, and we just had to go through the process, and this should crystallize the final amount of the process. And as I've said, it had to go through our both legal counsel at the Civil Service Commission and our own city attorney's office, and then ultimately approved by the city commission or the Civil Service Commission, and now brought to this body. And I can stand for any questions if there is any.
Mr. Montano, do y'all have a I guess, depending on the stimulus package and funding appropriation to the city's coffers, a priority list of how furloughs are to be, I guess, word is reversed as far as the personnel and classifications.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I believe the council passed in the budget a prioritization of some of those employees that should be returned off furlough days, which to include public safety. Obviously, that was done in the beginning of the year, but then I believe it bled down to other ancillary public safety entities as well. We don't have a matrix on how this will be divvied up. It's certainly a problem that we want to be able to address should it be something for our option right now. Certainly, we are still treading water for many, many different reasons financially. So when that time comes, I'm sure we'll be able to have great discussions about it. I'm hoping that it'll be all or nothing kind of deal, in the sense where everybody gets the opportunity by the amount of stimulus funding that we have. But as far as the specific criteria, other than the public safety direction that the council recently gave, we do not have anything articulated or outlined.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Jeruso, seconded by the chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5 yeas, no nays. Ms. Kondo, any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Thank you. 5 yeas, no nays, and motion is approved and moves to full council. Thank you. The next ordinance.
Good morning, council members. I want to make sure everybody can hear me okay.
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Joe Britton Shaw, and I'll be presenting the budget ordinances on behalf of the Chief Administrative Office. So the first two ordinances we have up are 33205 and 33206. These ordinances will establish a budget for property management in the Cemetery Maintenance and Repair Fund towards the operation, maintenance, repair, and/or improvement of city-owned cemeteries. One item of note, the actual fund was established last year in 2020. We are now just trying to appropriate the funding to allow property management to start performing their operational activity. We also have Ms. Stephanie Landry from Property Management here to answer any specific detailed questions.
Thank you, Yubi. And just for colleagues and for the public's information, these ordinances, as Yubi stated, provide for the funding and maintenance and repair of city-owned cemeteries. The fees and charges and revenues paid to the city for the use of city-owned cemeteries will be directed into a specific fund for the maintenance and repair of such. As we all know, and we have all discussed at this council and previous, historically, our city-owned cemeteries have not received the funding and support needed to maintain them. I am glad to see that the administration has worked to address that oversight with these budget ordinances. Yubi, you said there was somebody from property management?
Yep, Ms. Landry is here for any questions.
Good morning, Ms. Landry.
Good morning, Councilman.
Would you like to add something?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Do you have any questions regarding the ordinance that's being proposed? It's basically allowing us to spend the money that we receive in cemetery fees to fund the maintenance and repair of our city-owned cemetery, which you previously stated.
Thank you. Seeing no questions, Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Palmer, seconded by Councilmember Jeruso. All in favor?
Aye.
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 5 yeas, no nays, and the ordinances are approved.
Council, so the next ordinances up are 33,207 and 33,208. These ordinances will appropriate $8,600 in grant funds awarded by the Louisiana Department of Culture, Recreation, Tourism, and the National Park Service to the Department of Property Management. These funds will be used to provide research and outreach services for a collaborative ethnography pilot project. And the project will be focused on the historic Hope Cemetery. And again, we have Ms. Landry from Property Management here for any questions regarding that.
No, I just want to say, Chairman, I think this is really exciting. And I hope this is a first step and that there'll be more research done on our libraries, especially, I'm sorry, libraries. Guess what I have on my brain today? But with the cemeteries, I think it's super important, especially the cemeteries that have often been overlooked, like Hope Cemetery. And so I'm thrilled that y'all are starting this process. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmer. And with this ordinance, it's also federal and state grant funds for the Department of Property Management to document and preserve our cultural heritage. As you know, the Holt Cemetery, located in the Gentilly area, was established in 1879, and it's holds some 2,300 grave sites, and it includes some of our earliest musicians and earliest musicians. And so this grant will help study and ensure that the cultural significance of the cemetery is not forgotten for future generations. Ms. Landry, would you like to add something to this?
Yes, we're very excited about this project also because it's a necessary thing for the city, and we look forward to getting it on the road.
Thank you. I would move adoption.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Palmer. Ms. Condor, any public comment?
There are no public comments, Councilmember.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5 yeas, no nays, and ordinances 33,207 and 208 move to the full council. Next ordinance.
The next items we have up are 33,209 and 33,210. These ordinances will appropriate $25,000 in grant funds to the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice Coordination towards the administration of the Victims of Crime Act grant. So the costs covered by this grant will include operating, supplies, and hardware expenses associated with monitoring grant compliance and for funds distributed to local nonprofit victim service providers of the Victims of Crime Act grant. So we also have Ms. Tanisha Stevens from the Office of Criminal Justice Coordination to answer any specific detailed questions you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Yubi. This is a Victims of Crime grant provided by the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement. Will help to pay for monitoring grant compliance to assist with local nonprofit victim service providers. Commissioner Stevens, good morning and welcome.
This is Nathaniel Weaver from the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice Coordination, standing in for Commissioner Stevens. Can you hear me? Good morning. So yeah, happy to answer any questions. The Victims of Crime Act grant primarily goes to local nonprofits to provide victim service organizations, ranging from post-crime trauma for victims and their families to domestic violence assistance, to a range of other victim-related services. And this portion of the grant is allocated to the city by the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement just to cover our costs associated with monitoring and administering the grant funds.
Chairman, I have a quick question, if you don't mind, for Nathaniel.
Sure.
Madam President.
Hey, Nathaniel. Quick question. How much of this money from LCLE is the New Orleans Family Justice Center receiving?
I would need to check on that. So we had, the amount we get varies year by year. The last year we received $3.6 million total dollars in funding. And I will look up the amount for the Family Justice Center.
Yeah, just kind of the breakdown of grant dollars and the different nonprofits that are receiving money. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Moreno. Ms. Kondo, is any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Palmer, seconded by Councilmember Jeruso. All in favor?
Aye.
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 5 yeas, no nays. And the ordinance is 33,209 and 210 move to the full council.
So the next ordinances up will be ordinance calendar number 33-211 and ordinance calendar number 33-212. These ordinances will appropriate grant funds awarded to the mayor's office by J.P. Morgan Chase through an agreement with the New Orleans Business Alliance towards economic development of the water management industry cluster in New Orleans. I have Mr. Jeff Schwartz here from the mayor's office to provide any specifics or answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Yubi. And these ordinances appropriate funding towards the economic development project of a water management industry cluster, as I understand it, in our city. The funding will cover staff time and operational expenses incurred by the city during the development process. The project will identify policy recommendations to remove barriers for local small businesses and workers, targeting technical assistance to facilitate access to capital for our small businesses and disadvantaged businesses, and developing a strategic plan to create and grow a blue and green infrastructure workforce pipeline. Mr. Schwartz, would you, good morning, like to comment?
Good morning, Councilmember Brissett, and thank you. I think you largely covered it. This grant is a really exciting opportunity where our office and our partners at NOLA BA and other departments have been able to leverage the really extraordinary public expenditure on blue and green infrastructure in the city. I think we've all heard the talk, frankly, since Hurricane Katrina and probably before, about how some of our greatest challenges are also some of our greatest opportunities. And given the city's complicated relationship with water, the unprecedented expenditures in the Gentilly Resilience District, the Joint Infrastructure Program, and even some of the state dollars that are being spent on coastal restoration represent, no exaggeration, billions of dollars of public contracts. And this award from J.P. Morgan Chase is a really exciting investment by J.P. Morgan Chase in the city and its partners to be really intentional about connecting small businesses, particularly minority and small businesses and workers to these opportunities, these contracting opportunities in the water and green industries more generally. And so, we're excited to finally having the rubber hit the road. We received the $5 million award announcement towards the end of last year. And so this is some of the first examples where we're going to be doing some hiring and programming to build the city's capacity around this work. So this ordinance is a personnel and operating budget line item in order to really begin that work. So happy to answer any questions, and thank you all for the opportunity to present briefly today.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. And do you all have a marketing strategy to our small businesses and disadvantaged businesses to include as you all begin to create this strategic plan?
That's a fantastic question. Yes, that is in development. It hasn't been finalized yet, but a core part of this work is doing not only the sort of building the infrastructure, right, the systems in order to connect folks to these opportunities. It's also making sure that workers and businesses are aware of the opportunities. And so a significant element of the work plan for this grant is going to include marketing, outreach, conventional media, social media, and really working through the pretty amazing constellation of technical assistance providers and other supports that exist in the city to make sure that we really don't leave any stone unturned in terms of making sure folks are aware of these opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no questions, are there any public comments on these ordinances, Ms. Kondo?
There are no public comments, Councilmember.
Thank you. Motion to motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Moreno.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Palmer. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
5 yeas, no nays. Ordinances are approved. 32 to 11, 33 to 12. Moves to the full council. Next ordinance.
So the next items up are ordinance calendar number 33,228 and 33,229. These ordinances appropriate funds from 3 grants. The grants are going towards providing services to individuals with disabilities during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's also providing funding for general response to the COVID-19 pandemic and any future pandemics and bioterrorism events, and improving outcomes for moms and babies by addressing the persistent inequities that contribute to health disparities among women of color. So the first grant included within this is from the National Association for City and County Health Officials, and it'll provide one-time funding to hire a part-time staff member to help address the needs of New Orleanians who have disabilities and are having difficulties during the COVID-19 pandemic. The person will also assist with community outreach. The second grant included within this is for the city's readiness initiative. That funding is used to expand the plan for COVID-19 testing and vaccination. A point of note, the funding is already appropriated in 2021. We're now just appropriating the amount to align the budget with the actual grant award. And the last grant included within this is about $50,000, and it'll be used to provide wraparound services to mothers and infants. We have Ms. DeLarge here from the Health Department to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Yubi. As you stated, these grants will help the city's public health response capabilities, including our city's pandemic response plan, to include new testing and vaccine sites, and to ensure identified COVID-19 testing and vaccine sites are ADA compliant, and to improve the health outcomes for moms and babies by providing the wraparound services that address health disparities among women of color. Are there any public comment, Ms. Kondo?
No public comment.
You said Ms. DeLarge was on the phone?
Yes, sir, she's on.
Ms. Brandy, would you like to add something on the ordinances?
I just wanted to add that for the $50,000, we did already receive that award. We've granted that check to a county that's being held. So it was something we had to apply for in our city. It was one of the chosen pilot cities. So it's a great honor for New Orleans to be chosen to initiate that. And if we do great executing that, we'll be chosen for future awards as well.
Councilmember Brissette.
Yes, Councilmember Palmer.
Yes, I just want to thank the administration. You know, there's research that's just come out that is showing that pregnant women are 3.5 times more likely to be hospitalized due to COVID. In addition to that, they're also 13 times more likely to die because of COVID. And so anything that we can do in terms of any type of study and really targeting our pregnant women in New Orleans is hugely important. And I just really want to thank the administration. It's very forward thinking, especially as this information is just now coming to light. So thank you.
Thank you. With that, I would move adoption.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Councilmember Palmer, seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Five yeas, no nays, and the ordinance is moved to full council. Next ordinance.
So the last two items we have are ordinance calendar numbers 33,236 and 33,237. These ordinances will appropriate $11,633,425 in funds from the U.S. Department of Treasury to the Office of Community Development towards their emergency rental assistance program. The funds will be used to assist Orleans Parish households impacted by COVID-19 that earn 60% of the area median income. And we have Ms. Willman on the line to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, UB. And as stated, these are very important funding streams coming from the latest COVID package from the U.S. Treasury City's Office of Community Development, the ERAP, Emergency Rental Assistance Program, the $11.6 million was approved in Congress last year. The funding is available to assist households impacted by COVID who earn 60% or less of the area median income. Under the grant terms, the city will prioritize applicants with household incomes under 50% AMI or who at the time of application have unemployed household members. Both landlords and tenants can apply for the funding, and it may be used to cover up the 12 months of back due rent. The pandemic has, of course, impacted not only our renters, but also our landlords. And I'm glad that this allocation recognizes that fact and allows landlords to apply directly for the funding. Good morning, Ms. Willman.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for that. We're very excited about these funds. The city has already received the funds and plan for the program to begin taking applications on the 15th of February. And applications will be received through the Ready NOLA website, as well as hard completed applications can be dropped off at the Office of Community Development. And we're also planning to do some neighborhood outreach to those areas that have a very high eviction rate. So we're very excited about the program. And just to add that we are expecting an additional $14 million to come from the state for this fund. The governor sent a letter saying that those funds would be sent to the city once it's received by the state. So we're expecting a total allocation of $25 million. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Willman. And that's great news to hear about the allocation that is so much needed throughout our city right now. Councilmember Witt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Margiana, can you email us the hard copy of the application, if you don't mind? And then the second thing is that when the renters apply for the assistance, and I think it's great, much needed, are we making the check payable to the landlord? How are we working that? And then how does that work with the landlord is also going to apply for the same property?
Yes, so it's very important that there is no duplication of benefits. So that is going to be top priority. The preference is for funding to go directly to the landlord, but in instances where the landlord refuses to participate in the program, the assistance can go directly to the tenant.
Okay, so I'm just trying to think through this. If the landlord, I just can't imagine of a landlord refusing to participate because he or she's going to get reimbursement from back rent, right? Mm-hmm. So this, right. We're going retro. So if the landlord refused to participate, then if the money is used to reimburse rentals, then why are we cutting the check to the renter if the landlord is refusing to accept it? Or are we saying that they're going to use that money to find other housing? I'm right. A little bit confused.
Okay, so a landlord could say, I just want this person off of my property. And so one of the conditions that we are including, and I think this will be included around the state and many other jurisdictions are also requiring this, is that landlord not evict that tenant for 90 days, okay? And so a landlord may say that I just don't want them in my property anymore. I want them out. So we don't want to just say, well, that tenant can no longer receive any assistance. That tenant will need some assistance to get new housing and to become stable.
So, and again, so the next part is that are we going to ensure that they're going to use the money to get housing? What is there a connection or accountability that the evicted renters is going to use that for housing?
Yeah, so it's a couple different ways it can go. So this program will allow rent to be paid prospectively, like 3 months, up to 3 months at a time going forward. So if that tenant decides that they want to move, we can assist them and pay a new landlord for their rent for that period of time. And
but
that
you're going to take the check out to the land. I think for me is, and nothing against any renters, I think we hear it over and over. You know, there's been a lot of different programs that the city has pushed out last year to help renters. And I'm just not, because I'm hearing from both sides that landlords are not getting reimbursed or getting paid for their costs. So for me, it's accountability to make sure that if this is about providing housing for our residents, then we got to have some sort of connection with the landlord, because they're the one that basically keeps the lights on and, you know, and allow and provide the space. So.
No, I absolutely understand. And there are very limited circumstances where a tenant would actually receive these funds. So the landlord has to receive a certified letter. They have to be given notice. And then currently there has to be a 21-day wait period for that landlord to respond. After 21 days, then we are to go forward with helping the tenant.
Okay, so you mentioned that people can go on ready.nola.gov to apply. Is there, or is 311 going to be taking these calls too?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
and that's
so they could call 311 too?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if somebody went on 311 online, how would they classify this?
It's the rental assistance. If they call 311, we get all of the referrals. So 311 refers to us, all referrals related to housing. Our intake department would then go through that and then contact them and help them to go through the application process.
And you also mentioned that they could drop hard copy at the community development office.
Yes.
And what is that address?
Yes, ma'am. It's 1340 Poydras on the 10th floor.
Ooh. Okay. I know I haven't seen the application, or I'm assuming that they have to provide supporting documents along with their application.
So we're starting off with the application. We didn't want to, the application's very streamlined, so that'll be the preliminary, approval. They'll just put in that information, and then we'll go through and we'll check they could submit the support documentation during the process. We didn't want it to be a barrier where someone looked at the application and thought, oh my God, I need 10 items, so I'm not going to even apply. So they can apply, and we will contact them, and we'll go through what information needs to be submitted.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen. And Ms. Wellman, can you just explain the process? A landlord applies for the funds. Oh yeah, you switched screens on me. The landlord applies for funds on behalf of the tenant. And in the situation, the tenant also applies for the funds. The landlord application supersedes the tenant.
So it's the landlord application packet will also include the tenant's application. So if I'm a landlord, I'm interested in applying, I'm going to get a copy of the tenant application and the landlord application. I'm going to complete my portion, then I will take that application, the tenant's application, to the tenants, have them complete their information, and it'll all be submitted together, and we'll review the needs for that property at the same time.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you so much, Margiana. We're super excited about this fund. I really appreciate all the work. I know y'all have had to pivot quite frequently on this. So are you saying that, I'm really interested in our small landlords, right? Because they've been hit really hard, and they also have to pay the bank for their notes, et cetera. So then if they have a small, like a fourplex or a threeplex, then they would actually fill out like 4 different applications if 4 different tenants are not paying them rent?
Well, they would fill out their application as a landlord, and then they would ask their tenants to complete their application. And the applications are very short. They're 2-page applications. So it's not going to be, a hardship to get those completed.
Okay, great. So this is very much needed for them. So I just want to thank you. Councilmember Nguyen pretty much asked all my questions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, would move adoption. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. Ms. Kondo, any public comment?
Yes, Councilmember, we have one public comment from Andrenesia Morris. She's not a paid representative. While we are relieved that the federal government has finally provided substantial resources to address the catastrophe caused by COVID-19 pandemic exploding into our already troubled housing market, we have to acknowledge that these resources still do not fully address the needs of the people of New Orleans. With that in mind, we urge the administration to implement the following guidelines for the next phase of the program. Hire staff to assist renters and landlords. Ensure beneficiaries can only be evicted for lease violations. Require landlords to forgive late fees and past due rent prior to April 2020. Allow self-certification to the largest extent possible. When landlords refuse to participate, provide assistance to tenants. Ensure tenants are fully stable. 2 other priorities: cooperation with the courts and the utility moratoriums have already been established by the mayor's office and the city council. We are proud that New Orleans has consistently offered innovations to address this crisis. However, more must be done. We anticipate even more funding with the $1.9 trillion relief plan, which will still help the majority of renters, and we have yet to find funding for homeowners. New Orleans must put housing first and identify any and all additional funds to stabilize our friends and neighbors through the rest of this pandemic. That ends the public comments.
Thank you, Ms. Kondo. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5 yeas, no nays. And ordinances 33,236 and 237 move to the full council. So
that completes our presentation of the ordinances. We'll now move on to the budget reports. I'll give the introduction to Ms. Carla Felton, Deputy Director of Finance, to start presenting the personnel spending projection.
Thank you, Yubi. Ms. Felton, good morning.
Good morning.
We'll have,
I'm here to present the November and December 2020 personnel spending projections. Are they going to come out?
Can everybody hear you? Just to make sure the sound is okay.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes. Yes.
At the council's request, we have 2 months of reports today. We're going to focus on the December, being that is the most current at the time. The main change from the November's projections are due to the cleanup ordinance. The overall surplus for the year is tentatively $25.8 million for the year based on the payroll data for December 31st. The surpluses are expected based on the planned furloughs taken and the attrition in 2020. And I'm going to open up for questions at this time.
Chairman?
yes, Councilmember Palmer.
Just when you say surplus, my question is, it really, I guess, that's a savings, right? Because we don't have that revenue. Is that correct? Or you're saying we do have a surplus?
I'm saying that the budgeted amount was 435 and we came in under at 409. So, right. So we have a savings of 25.8 million at this current time.
That's what I meant. It's like a savings, correct?
Yes.
That we don't have that $25 million in the bank. We just needed to cut in order to adapt to less revenues coming in.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, cool. I just wanted the public to be aware of that. Thank you.
If there are no questions, we can move on to the other operating report. Again, we have the November and December, and we can focus on December. The most current, it is a snapshot of the December 31st expenditures. The number is going to change. I just want to make that clear because we are in the year-end close process, which is a 2-month modified accrual period for the revenue and up until the audit field work starts for the expenditures. So this number is very likely going to change, but we're showing at current that we have a $37 million savings.
Can I ask the same question as Councilmember Palmer? When you say $37 million, is that in the bank or is that, sort of like as a result of not having enough money from the revenue side?
This is based on the budgeted amount for 2020. So we're beating the budget. However, we will have more expenses coming through the year. So we're showing this today. Now, going further, this amount will change.
So you think by the end, we're in early February now, by the beginning of March, we'll be at true up time where we can tell total expenses over total revenue plus savings, so we know what the surplus amount will be, or the cleanup charges as we call them?
Probably closer to mid-March, closer to April. We'll be able to gather up all the information and report closer to what the true up should be.
Thank you.
Yes.
So, council member, one point of clarification also, this is still unaudited data. So even in March come up, it will be very preliminary information that's really only good for internal usage and just kind of getting the pulse of where we are.
Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, I believe we can go on to the revenue collections report for Mr. Randall McElroy.
Thank you. You one quick question.
Yes, sir.
The 23 million in fire, 23 million deficit in fire that's listed in the operating.
So that is not an actual true deficit. It was due to a miskey. We actually made the correction for other adjustments and we're working on that. So in the data that's going to come out, the actual audited data that we're talking about, we'll have that clarification in there. So it's really just a byproduct of us going to that new system and that post-cyber attack world, right? Some transactions, you know, when you enter them in at the point of attack, we just have some miskeys. It's a very minor issue and something we caught early on. We just have to, you know, manifest that throughout all our systems. So it's not a deficit or anything like that. It's just an incorrect charge.
All right. Once it's corrected, would you send us the corrected version?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now on the revenue collections, Mr. McElroy. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, council members. We also have November and December reports here, and we'll focus on December. I will note just the bottom line for November, we were about on track relative to the previous year. Once the extraordinary revenues were taken into consideration. In in December, this report does not show accruals made in sales taxes. So this number will be higher a little bit later on when more numbers are in and the accountants have updated this. But overall, property tax is about where we expected. Other taxes will see an increase, which will be actually each month in the last quarter of the 2020 was slightly higher than expectation. There was a lot of uncertainty when the forecast was put in, of course, but we're doing just a little bit better there. So this should pick up. Unfortunately, will not meet the original revenue target as we knew, but we'll be better than than we had feared in the middle of the year. Some of these other items are pretty much tracking where they have been all year, so I won't dwell on them. You will notice, of course, service charges has a substantial increase. This is due to some one-time revenue, and the miscellaneous category number 6 also includes a lot of one-off payments that, that might happen again this year. I guess that's up to Congress. But overall, that's putting us, once the accruals are made, about where we expected to be in the revised forecast, which is, of course, sadly, a good deal lower than we had hoped to be before the pandemic. Once we subtract out the one-time revenues, recurring revenue was down, of course, a whole lot. We were able to plug some of those holes, and unfortunately, we'll still be lower, but again, we revised our expectations and our expenditures, including the furloughs. So we should be pretty on track with our current plans. I don't have a lot of specific information otherwise, unless there are any questions.
I have a question in terms of, it's okay, I'm sorry, Chairman, do you mind? Yes, thank you. And I know this is 2020. I wish we had a 2021 column as well, just so we could see what we're projecting out. But I think it gives everybody pause when we see our property values, our property taxes have increased pretty substantially, right? From 2019 to 2020. Are we going to see that again going into 2021? I know, especially since the assessor cut the commercial side of things, I would hate to see this on the back of our residents.
Thank you for your question. No, so the quadrennial reassessment is the main reason these property taxes have increased. It should be relatively stable for the next few years until the next reassessment. Obviously, we could not continue this kind of increase of $20 million each year, but no, we basically hit a plateau, then stay steady there. Then 4 years from now, that may change. That depends on how things are assessed and roll forward, roll back, that kind of thing. But that's the reason it happened. Comparing these 2 years, and it's pretty steady for 2021 in the forecasts.
Right. And then we do see an increase in the document transaction tax. I'm just highlighting that. It appears too, going into 2021, that there's a lot more transactions regarding property that we're going to keep seeing.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for bringing that up as well. We have seen, right, as a result of the pandemic, a lot of businesses, a lot of properties, there's a lot of the plans are changing, which includes the ownership change in hands, which is reflected here. Hopefully this will stabilize. This year, we would expect to see a little bit more of this as the effects of the pandemic are still, we're still feeling them. This should begin to stabilize later this year. And again, it's a little early to say for 2022, but I would expect broadly that this would decline once everything settles down.
And then also, just your opinion, Mr. McElroy, I find it interesting that the sales tax declined, but not by significantly more than we had thought. I mean, do you think that that's a healthier year end than what we had anticipated with the pandemic?
Well, in our initial, that's another good question. In our initial, very first off, in March, kind of internal adjustment of expectations kind of projection, we really had no idea. And we thought, we feared the worst. This could really drop through the floor. The adjustments people have made have been a lot more shopping online, and we are now collecting a lot more of the sales tax from that. So that was, encouraging. Restaurants not being able to have people inside, there was still more sales to go, and then than we expected. And then once these the various phases went in, where they were able to have 10% or 25% or whatever percentage of their normal occupancy return, I guess people were really really looking forward to doing that. So that was stronger than we expected. Outdoor dining adjustments were made for that. So and a lot of little changes, we mitigated the losses that early on it looked like we could be facing. Of course, not all the way back, and all of us just walking around, you can still see some places not operating at full capacity, but it was slightly encouraging, given, of course, the fact that we simply can't have 100% occupancy for all of these things right now.
Right. And I do think it's fascinating, and I hope people notice this too, that our building permits only decreased by 10%. So I think that's probably the uptick of what we've seen in the fall in terms of building, and that should continue on the uptick, hopefully within 2021.
These plans are longer term plans, so they are not as sensitive to, obviously if the workers can't show up, that's a problem, but with safety measures, these are longer term plans that are not quite as cyclical as for example, sales tax. So that was encouraging, yes.
I appreciate it. And just I've gotten a text from somebody that it's hard to see the numbers especially for people like me, the public, because I'm older. So if maybe next time we could have a bigger sheet of the numbers so the public could see them a little bit better.
I'm making a note of this. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I don't have young eyes, so I sympathize.
I understand.
Thank you.
Council member, we'll have this posted on the website after the meeting.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. I'm sure everybody loves looking at numbers as much as I do. So.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I follow up?
For your work.
Yes, Councilmember Jeruso.
So I think Councilmember Palmer on property tax too. Remember, Carrollton, Uptown were reassessed this year, and so I think we're going to be within 2 or 3%, right, Randall? I think that's what REC projected.
Right. So there were some decreases for commercial properties, which made it into the paper. Certainly, people take notice of that. But slightly quieter were in other areas. They caught up on some of the properties that were not assessed in the previous round, which is why it's overall should be stable.
Right.
Yes. Sir.
And to Councilmember Palmer's question about sales tax, I think the numbers were sort of trending $11 to $13 million per month last year. It looks like we're a little over 12. Has the beginning of 2021 stayed steady, or are we seeing any more uptick, or is it too early to tell?
It's a little too early to tell. I think it is. The 2021 forecast assumes, and I also think, and those two things are not coincidental. That we will see, it should continue about, where we were at the end of last year. Christmas, obviously, there's a bump, but we are definitely, the recovery is, very slow, very drawn out, but it is real, it is happening. And for those numbers, we should see a fairly steady increase, a very small, but, sort of monotonic of healthier numbers than we got used to last year.
All right. And then going down the page in service charges, where we see the big bump in general government, is that attributable to the one-time money from Harrah's and the Four Seasons?
Yeah. So I'm pulling up the specific line items. We don't want to delve too far into that, but the money for, Harrah's money went into there in a couple of different categories. They had different classifications of payments, but ultimately it did go into subheadings of service charges. Okay. So yes, that money sadly will not repeat in 2021, but it did help us.
Yeah, you anticipated my next question, which was, is there any other, and I know we don't like to run our budgets based on one-time money, but are there any other large slugs of one-time money we should be looking at for 2021 other than stimulus money?
We had, let me pull up the other, well, it depends on what large is, but I guess the short answer would be no, probably not. We had a little bit of fund balance budgeted because, there were some expenses that we can't continue to cut expenses indefinitely. But there are otherwise not a lot of big one-time payments that would mirror anything we saw this year, unless, of course, things change in Washington or whatever plan they have comes to fruition. But nothing like Harrah's, for example.
I got it. And I think you indicated under miscellaneous, that's where we plugged in the stimulus money the city received.
Yes. And I should note that was more of a reimbursement than a stimulus exactly. So hopefully, it depends on how we, again, how it goes in Washington now. We could see whatever kind of payment we would see, but it would go into miscellaneous, yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McElroy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chair, question too.
Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you. Randall, one thing that would be really helpful to the council, you were talking about sales tax and kind of the impact that it's on different industries. You mentioned restaurants. Do you think you can come up with a report for the council as to sales tax impact by industry, so we can take a look at retail, restaurants, grocery, so we can see, at the end of the day, as we work toward recovery and revival, who's going to need what type of help? And by having that type of data, I think it could even be useful for different groups like GNO Inc. And other folks who are working to get additional funding for our business community. But it's really with that type of data and those numbers that we're going to be able to drive who needs that additional assistance. Do you think you could do that, Randall?
We do collect some of that. I will have to check with the Department of Revenue to see specifically how this can be sliced. I know in broad terms, we do collect some more specific data like that. But I wouldn't give you an expectation of we will provide this or that specifically. However, something like this broadly should be available if we. Excuse me, I'm making notes. If we can, if I can coordinate with revenue to see the kinds of categories these are collected in.
That would be great. And Mr. Chairman, if you wouldn't mind, I would really like for Randall to be able to present that to us during our next budget meeting, if you wouldn't mind putting that on the agenda.
Yes, Council.
Yeah, just Mr. Chairman, I'd ask to go through and do really a sales tax analysis by industry. And if possible, Mr. Chair, I would like that presented at our next budget meeting. I just think that's really important information for the council to have, if you would allow that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. I would just like to say, I think that's a fantastic idea, Councilmember Moreno. I absolutely think that would be great. It would really, like you said, allow us to trend out what industries. And Randall, if you can't break it even down, you might be able to do it even geographically, because it might also be interesting to see what, like, say, the French Quarter revenues are coming in, if you can't break it out also per industry, because if nothing else, that could give us a good indication on how the hospitality industry is doing. But regardless, I think it's great for us to be able to look at these trends. And so thank you so much, Councilman Moreno. I totally agree. Thank you, Chair.
Again, if I may, I will check with revenue and see what we have, and we will we'll try to coordinate this. I'll get right on that as soon as we are finished here.
Thank you, Randall. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Moreno. Mr. Councilmember Druso, you finished following up with questions? Mr. McElroy, you have anything else?
If all the council members are satisfied, I'm satisfied.
Always could use more money.
Well, we certainly could.
Thank you. And that ends the presentation of the revenue collections.
Chair, council member, we can conclude with the status of the current workforce report, and I'll be presenting that information. As with all of our other reports, this report is a snapshot in time, right? So it captures the city's workforce as of, January 31st, 2021. For this report, we track the total number of employees by department, percent on and not on civil leave, and the percent of staff working remotely. So if we look at the report, we have about 4,882 employees, with about 7% of those on civil leave, about 93% not on civil leave. And out of our total number of employees, we have about 21% that are working remotely. We will continue to track this information and use this for planning as we continue working on our new normal in this, COVID-19 environment and post-COVID-19 environment. I'll now open the floor for any questions about this information.
Yubi, is the civil leave being picked up by the federal government, or is that reimbursable, or is it coming out of the general fund?
So we actually have charge codes specifically geared towards reimbursement for COVID-19. We also have appropriation unit that we track the funding. So those expenditures that are directly tied to COVID-19 are being reimbursed. That's really being coordinated upstairs with Homeland Security. And they've really been on top of that. So that's being tracked separately and really being recorded so we can get after our reimbursement.
Councilmember Brossette?
Yes, Councilmember Palmer?
I'm just going to bring this up. I know this is really more of a policy issue than a budgetary issue. But I guess people say that the budget's kind of a reflection of our policy. When you look at safety and permits, and you have percent on civil leave is 8.8%, which is almost double the number of the entire of everybody on there. And then you see that, you know, that they are issuing permits and that there is a huge delay at safety and permits, and especially when not just delay, but lack of enforcement. I really would like this number to be different. And obviously that's not what we're here about, but I just want to say that if you only have a line item where they've only decreased 10% in terms of the revenue they've brought in by permitting, and they're taking this kind of hit in terms of their layout of people on furlough, it doesn't make a lot of economic sense to have this department hit more if they're producing more than other departments, or they're being asked to produce more than other departments. And I just want to state again, just for the public, that I do believe that safety and permits is economic development. If we're hitting a boom for building and we can't get permits out the door, and if some of our quality of life is being affected in the neighborhoods because of short-term rentals and our doubles to dorms, I know Councilman Druso has been forced to face all the time, then we have a problem. So I just wanted to just state that. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Palmer. Seeing anything? Anybody else? Questions?
Chair, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to mention something. I just wanted to say, Yubi, you have done really just a tremendous job during this council meeting. So it is a pleasure to have you join us. You have been incredibly thorough with your presentations, very knowledgeable in all the matters that you brought before us. So I just wanted to tell you that we very much appreciate that. Thank you, Yubi.
Thank you. That's very appreciated. Didn't expect that at all.
Thank you, Yubi.
And he smiles when he talks about numbers, which is also, he's very excited talking about numbers. I like that bit. So thank you.
Thank you, Yubi. Yes, this has been a seamless budget committee, and we appreciate your all of your input and your thorough analysis. Seeing no other questions.
Thank you, Councilman. I think barring anything else, I think that concludes our presentation and the information we have for the Budget Committee today.
And seeing no other questions on workforce status, that concludes our agenda for today. And seeing no other business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Been moved by Councilmember Palmer and seconded by Councilmember Druso.
I think it was moved by Councilmember Moreno.
I'm sorry. Councilmember Moreno has been moved to adjourn and seconded by Councilmember Druso.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.